Alright, just doing a short recap of turn 4, which was much shorter than turn 5, or than turn 3. Moved on to turn 5 now. As you can see, the French army has actually started to regroup. The French armies, the two of them. You can see here the Army of Alsace linking up with the Army of the Rhine, which is still hiding in Verdun. The Prussians took a break because they are sieging a number of forts and fortresses that are in their rear, and they don't want to have to be overly concerned about in terms of supply. Metz isn't all that important in terms of supply. It is kind of on the rail line. If they make their way to Paris, it's on the northern rail line. They have a number of rail line supply options for when they get to Paris, assuming they get to Paris. And Metz is on that northern route. But not only is Metz there, but also these 3 forts here, which are going to be kind of a problem. Same thing, there's just a lot of forts along that northern rail line, not as many through the central rail line, or even the southern rail line if they ever get desperate enough to look at that option. But the main reason that I wanted to siege Metz was, well, for one, to see how sieging a major fortress went, and also for the victory points. The Prussians get victory points for fortresses, not so much for forts, even though I am sieging that fort there just because it's right in the middle of my path of advance. The Prussians did siege the fortress of Bitch up here, and they managed to get that in just 2 turns. So I put a Prussian control marker on it. And that's another one that's along a rail line. Nice to have those out of the way, although the Prussians do have that special rule that allows them to bypass, to rail bypass fortresses on a rail line. I don't think they can do that indefinitely or for an infinite number of forts, but regardless, forts aren't that, if I get a good roll, I can do a fort, as you can see here, in 2 turns. This fort has 2 siege points on it. Now, the siege number for forts is only 2, but my understanding is that you need to exceed that number with your siege points. So essentially, to actually control or force a fort to surrender, you need to accumulate more than 2 siege points. So simply equaling the siege number of the fort isn't enough to cause it to surrender. That's at least not what the rules say. And that is rule, it's toward the end, page 60, 16.2.4, siege resolution phase. Under surrender, when the accumulated siege progress level marker exceeds the siege number of the fortress, not equals or exceeds, but exceeds. So that tells me that I need 3 points. So I was able to get an 11 on my roll up here for Bitch, which gave me 2 siege points for the turn. I already had 1 from last turn. Here I only got 1. I had 1 siege point from last turn and got 1 this turn. Here on Strasbourg, I just now started this siege. I moved the newly created Prussian 4th Army, which I used all those corps that I'd moved down here to drive the French out of Baden. I created an army down here and assembled all those corps into that army, and then moved it across the river and into the empty Strasbourg, which is now under siege. But it takes a little longer to siege a fortress. I need to exceed 6 points on a fortress. So, that's going to be max or minimum 4 turns. That's if you get 2 points per turn. It's going to be 3 turns to get 6 points. It'll be 4 turns to get over 6 points, so which will result in surrender. So, taking a drink because it's always important to game with a drink. Makes the turns fly by, I'll tell you. Okay, maybe not in this game. So Strasbourg is underway. I've got 3 points now on Metz, so that's halfway there, or just under halfway there. But the French Army of Alsace has made the slow move. I could have moved a lot of these guys by rail. I really don't want to exceed that 8-point non-penalized strength point by rail movement for the French. Any strength points over 8 that I move by rail, I start to take victory point hits for each additional 4 strength points. I guess I could do 12, or I could do 11 strength points of movement without taking a victory point penalty. But that's not going to get me very much, very many corps moved. So I ended up just marching them across through the Vosges here. They are now kind of, the left flank is kind of hanging on Nancy here, which I know is not the proper French pronunciation of the word, but it's just funny. Bitch and Nancy, it's great to just mangle these. I'm sure it drives anybody who speaks French crazy. And I may take some pleasure in that. So the left side of the line, and I think actually I've also got 5th Corps over here, which is also part of the Army of Alsace. So you could say the far left, I guess, is actually over here at the fort at Toul. Why do I have a field fortification there? That I don't know. I don't need to build a field fortification on a fort. Just wondering if that accidentally got moved from somewhere else. Well, I'll just toss it away for now. I don't know if building a field fortification in a city, I need to look at the rules for field fortifications. Maybe you can build them there, and that would be cumulative with the city modifier. I would think not, though, because if you're in the city, you will not have built field fortifications in an urban location. So anyway, that's a rule I'll have to look up. But this is where things stand. Basically, the Prussians have largely stopped their advance just to wrap up these sieges where they can. Time will tell whether that's a mistake or not, given that it's given the French, A, time to regroup their armies, and B, funnel in a lot of strength points to some weakened corps. Conversely, the Prussians have been able to do the same thing, have been reinforcing the Prussians that are along rail lines and stuff, have been funneling strength points into them as well. So you can see on the corps strength charts here, most of these corps are in very good shape. I've got a couple, like you can see on the 13th Corps there. It's not at full strength, and I've got a couple of mobile infantry in there. Same thing up here with the Prussians. The 1st and 2nd Corps were almost destroyed in Baden, and so I ended up throwing some landwehr into the 1st Corps, but the 2nd Corps I've been able to reinforce back to full strength. Otherwise, the Prussian corps are all at full strength. But the French, I had that destroyed 4th Corps. I got to bring them back on and get them some more strength points. That might be a good one to do in Paris. And on this next turn, create... We've got 2 armies now for the French that I can use, the Army of the Loire and the Army of Paris. And so I might create the Army of Paris and just stick the ready-to-go 4th Corps right in there. Anyway, that's where we stand at the beginning of turn 5.